So today we're talking about You and Owen Was Her. You and Owen Was Her is an incredibly famous song from Touhou. I'd say it's probably the most famous piece from Touhou in the West, at least. And it has an incredible meme potential, whether it's the Ronald, you know it for the Ronald McDonald meme, or the John Stump Death Waltz, Black MIDI. There's so many, sources on the internet. If you grew up in the 2000s, you grew up in even the early 2010s, then you would have saw this song at least a couple times, maybe with Flowering Night or something like that accompanied with it. But I'd say that it's probably the most famous song from Touhou, at least in my country. And we're going to talk about how it's constructed. It's really clever. And, John Stump couldn't write something like this. So let's figure out what he's actually doing here that makes the song so memorable. So this is our function diagram if you're new here. And we're going to use this diagram in order to color our diagram to kind of get some idea of what's going on. So we start out on this one chord in this weird meter of 5/4, and on this one chord we then move to flat 7, which is a dominant function chord. So we're moving from a very stable chord to a dominant function flat 7 chord, and the dominant function flat 7 chord will then transition nicely back into another green chord. And then we get this ambiguous sort of blue chord going on to kind of connect back, and then he repeats it. Right? And then we have this contrasting section. This section, the greens get replaced with blues. But that creates a problem, because look in position 4. We have green, red, green, blue at the beginning. But we don't want two blues in a row because that would be boring. It would just be too much blue, right? So he swaps out the blue in position 4 with a red. And that actually creates this chain, this blue-red chain. On line 2, you can see this blue-red chain going on. And by doing that, it actually creates a lot of motion, a lot of cadential motion towards the green in position 5 on line 2. So let me play that, and you can hear how it creates that directional motion towards the green. Right? Doesn't that fully diminished 7 chord really want to resolve to that green chord in position 5? Let me play it again. Yeah, I think it's a really effective motion. And then after that, we get basically a prolongation of that original idea. And then we go into our next section. So in our next section, we get this really heavily chromatic, sort of triadic, like descending triad figure. And we start on green, we go through blue, and then we have blue-red, right? Blue-red is kind of like a cadential figure. But listen to how absolutely dark all of this sounds. So, what is creating all this incessant darkness? Well, take a look at these chords here. So these are the chords that we're dealing with. We're dealing with minor 1, minor 7, minor, we're dealing with major 2 and major flat 2. So we have 2 minor chords and 2 major chords. And let's look at how these chords are related to each other. You have 1 and 7, which are a half step apart. And you have flat 2, you have natural 2 to flat 2, which are a half step apart. And you can see every single arrow on this diagram that is red represents a half step motion, and every single arrow on this diagram that is green represents a whole step. So you can see that most of the motion by step in this progression are half steps, right? And that creates a lot of kind of pushing downward, you know? We're pushing downward towards a goal, and in this case, it's back to 1. Right? And then it feels like it lands on 1. Now, there's another way to look at this. So, let's say we were in Lydian mode, in B flat Lydian. Right? Then we would have the 7 chord and the 2 chord in Lydian. That's where those 2 chords come from now. Right? It's like Lydian mode. And then look at this chord right here. This is a flat 2 chord. And a flat 2 chord, of course, is obviously from Phrygian mode, which Phrygian is a very dark mode. Right? That's that flat 2 chord. Right? So Lydian is literally the brightest mode that there is out of the 7 modes. By comparison, Phrygian is the darkest possible minor mode, and the only thing darker than Phrygian would be Locrian, right? Which is not even a minor scale, it's a diminished scale. As a result, this is a big shift, and it's an immediate shift, right? We have natural 7, we have natural 2, and then it immediately shifts down 5 modes to flat 2. So that's going to sound really dramatically dark all of a sudden, right? Which is kind of how it sounds. Now, if that makes sense to you, that's great, but this section is super easy to understand because this is a very classic Zune chorus section. It's a flat 6, flat 7, 1. And unlike a lot more, it's actually sort of uncommon to see a major 4 chord in Zune's music at all, let alone unless it's like a walk up sometimes. He'll do something like that, like walking up. But this is sort of an unusual use of a 4 chord. It's sort of a 4 chord that resembles like Nintendo music in a way. Like, let me play it. Right? This sort of section, this chorus section, is weirdly Nintendo sounding. I can think of a bunch of examples of it, like right where 4 is followed by flat 6. Right there we go 4, flat 6. I can also think of like that's 4 to flat 6. You go. That's a 4 chord to flat 6, right? It's weirdly common in Nintendo music to have 4, like a major 4 chord move to flat 6. And that's kind of what's going on here. So it's unusual because Zune doesn't usually do that, right? He doesn't usually create that Dorian, Aeolian sort of palette that Nintendo uses, but he's kind of pulling upon that here, and it's really nice. It's a nice little effect. The next section is not really easy to describe. I'm going to try two different ways to describe it. So we have this ambiguous chord that prolongs the one chord. So we have this really strong cadence, right? And then he does this. He creates a little bit of ambiguity by getting rid of the third of the chord and instead changing it to a 4. That's why it says 1-4. Instead of 1-3, it's 1-4 with like a 4 that needs to resolve, right? And he just does this. Right? And that sets you up for a modulation. So let's figure out how this modulation works. There's a couple ways that we can look at it. So we move to this 3 chord, right? What is this 3 chord and how did he choose it? I think the best way to describe what's going on here is to look at these things on my diagram that I haven't talked about yet. These are called the Remanian relations, or transformations. That's what they call them. Remanian transformations. So in order to get from minor primary to major primary, you need to use this P transformation. In order to get from major primary to the minor secondary chords, you need to use the R transformation. For example, you see this 1-4? This 1-4 comes from the minor primary, and then we eventually reach this minor 3 right here, right? So how do we get there? We need to move from the minor primary to the major primary, which is using that P relation. And we need to move from the major primary to the minor secondary, which is that R relation. So what are these P and R relations and what do they stand for? So it's like P plus R, right? Well, the first one is P, which means parallel. It means to go to the scale that has the opposite quality. So if we were in B flat minor and we played something like this, right, that would be like the primary chords in B flat minor. But if we were going to do the parallel relation, this is what would happen. We'd keep the bottom note the same, but we'd change it from minor chords to major chords. So instead of, it would become, right? So you're going to the key that has the opposite quality chords, but keeps the starting note the same, the root of the scale. So like if we were in B flat minor, it would become B flat major. If we were in B flat major, it would become B flat minor. So the P is really simple. You take the key and you change it from major to minor, right? That's the simple one. But the R relation is more complicated. So R stands for relative, and it has a bunch of rules associated with it, right? If it's a 1 chord, it'll become a 6 chord. If it's a 4 chord, it'll become a 2 chord. If it's a 5 chord, it'll become a 3 chord. And then it's the reverse in the opposite direction for minor. So if you have a minor 1 chord, it'll become a flat 3 chord. If you have a minor 4, it'll become a flat 6 chord. And if you have a minor 5, it'll become a flat 7 chord. So why does all this matter? What do these relations do for us? Like, how do they help us understand this progression? Well, notice that all of the major ones move down. Like 1 to 6 is down a minor third, 4 to 2 is down a minor third, 5 to 3 is down a minor third, but all the minor ones move up a minor third. Like minor 1 moves to flat 3, 4 moves to 6, and 5 moves to flat 7, right? That's up a minor third. So what is this? Basically what we're doing is we're going to the key that has the exact same notes as the one, we're basically going, if we're in a major key, there's a minor key associated with that key that has the exact same notes, and we're going to that key, and it's always going to be a minor third away. To try to demonstrate this a little bit better, take a look at these two scales. These are C major and A minor. That's a C major scale, but what if we started a C major scale starting on A? Now we have an A minor scale. Notice that A minor and C major have the exact same notes. Well, we can use this to kind of create a sort of relationship between the two keys, the fact that they have all the same notes. Well, look at the distance between these two scales, between A and C. A and C are a minor third apart. Isn't that interesting? That's why all these relative relation things move us a minor third. Because what we're doing is, if we're in like C major, for example, we'll end up changing to a chord that's in A minor instead. If we're in A minor, we'll end up changing to a chord that's in C major instead, right? That's basically how this works. So let's say we had a 1 chord. If we were going to do P plus R, the P is our parallel relation. So we'd take that 1 chord and we'd make it major, because we want to keep the bottom note the same, right? But just change the quality. And then from 1, we'd do the relative relation, and that would give us 6, which would be, in this case, G minor. So if we started on B flat minor, we would go to B flat major, then to G minor, right? And now we can figure out what this 3 chord is. This 3 chord sounds like minor 5 in G minor, right? So D minor is minor 5 of G minor. So in a way, the chord's really functioning in G minor, not in B flat minor. And it's a minor 5 chord in G minor. Now, think about how far away that is. B flat minor versus the 5 chord of G minor. B flat minor has 5 flats. G minor has 2 flats. And this is the 5 chord in G minor. So these are 2 chords that are pretty far away from each other. You can tell just by listening to it that they're far away from each other. And in this case, we are removing flats, so we're actually making it brighter. Notice that when I move from the B flat minor chord to the G minor chord, that it feels kind of sour sounding. There's like a sourness to it. That's what happens when you move to a bright minor chord. When you move to a bright minor chord, it's going to sound sour. It's going to sound uncomfortable, right? Brightness does not only mean like happy in music, it also means uncomfortable, right? Because dark things feel more comfortable, and like there's less contrast between things. Dark modes have a certain comfort to them that bright modes don't. And bright scales, I guess, in this case. So we're actually employing this bright minor 5 chord in G minor, which is what gives this transition kind of its characteristic sound. You can feel how it sort of brightens up and like gives you that sour sort of feeling. But we are moving to a minor chord, so it's not completely bright. So let's take a look back at our thing here. We started at a minor 1, and then we transitioned to 3, which is the red chord on the minor secondary chords. And you can see G minor would be the minor secondary chords in this case, and B flat minor would be the minor primary chords. So it kind of fits into our diagram too. You can see the 1 chord in G minor is the 6, and the 3 would be D minor, the chord that we're talking about. So if that explanation destroyed your brain and you hated it and you thought it was long-winded and too much to follow, maybe you'd like a modal explanation for this transition. Well, let's look at the chorus here again. Other than this major 4 chord, which is sort of unusual for Zun's style, what we have here is flat 6, flat 7, 1, and then the major 4, and then flat 6, flat 7, 1. Well, that's a pretty Aeolian progression, right? And then we have this D minor chord, which, if we compare it to like a mode in B flat, would be like Ionian. Right? It feels like B flat Ionian. But our normal progression is kind of like this. So it's like we moved from Aeolian to Ionian. And you can see that the 3 chord is kind of like the 3 chord in Ionian rather than in Aeolian, which is the mode that the chorus was in. So that's a shift of like 3, right? So you get plus 3. We go up by 3. So in the other example, I explained that we went to 5 of G minor, which was a much brighter mode. Well, here we can see we're going up by 3 modally. So this is another way to kind of see what's going on here. You can hear that it's getting brighter because it feels sour, right? Right? That motion. And that sourness comes from being brighter and going to a minor chord as well. It's kind of a combination of both of those effects. And let's look at this 1-4 chord, the one that's highlighted right now, because this is a really important chord, because it helps us transition between, the Ionian and the Aeolian, right? So he could have done this. Yeah, but doesn't that suck? Isn't that terrible? This is what he does instead. Isn't that way smoother, right? The reason why it's smoother is because by adding that 4 instead of this, which is just a normal minor chord, by adding that 4 suspension, it adds like a nice transition, like an ambiguity that allows you to transition to that D minor chord, right? So a lot of thought went into how he would make this motion smooth between Aeolian and Ionian, or between B flat minor and 5 of G minor, right? So looking at this chart here, we have the bridge section, and the bridge is actually the most straightforward thing in the entire piece. We have flat 6, flat 7, 1, flat 6, flat 7, 7 diminished 1, flat 6, flat 7, 1, flat 6, flat 7, and then a fake out that then transitions to another section. So let me play this, right? We have the... augmented chord that kind of is like the fake out, right? So we have flat 6, flat 7, 1, and then flat 6, flat 7, 7, 1, and then flat 6, flat 7, 1, and then flat 6, flat 7, and then a fake out, right? And then that fake out is actually also a dominant chord in our home key. All he needs to do is take the bottom note and step up a half step. And then we're back to the home key. So you got that flat 6, flat. So basically all of these are just modified flat 6, flat 7 ones, as you can see here. So the next sections are all repetitions. They're repetitions of these sections. So we can just fill them in. And at this point, all that's left is that no chord. And that no chord is just one measure of nothing. It's just nothing for a little while, and then it goes into the chorus again after that. So let me actually play this last section just to show you where all the material is coming from. So we have this. And then after the fake out, we have the that descending triad figure. But it actually repeats more this time. It repeats 4 times. And then we get a little bit of silence, and then this great transition straight into the chorus again. Right? It's such a fun chorus. So now let's talk about these last couple things. So as we can see, we look at, besides the modulation, which is kind of its own thing, this piece is made up of very few things in general. We have this tonic dominant alternation, right? This sort of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth figure from the beginning. We have the descending triads, right? The descending triads figure. Then we have flat 6, flat 7, 1. Right? So those are kind of like the three ideas in the piece, right? I talked about in the last couple of videos, almost all great video game music comes in 3, right? You have 3 different ideas that are used in different ways throughout the piece. Well, I think that this is a perfect example. I mean, imagine if you got rid of one of these. You had like 2 of them. Like you just had the and the right? With that would mean getting rid of the chorus, right? Could you imagine how bad this track would be? How terrible this song would be if you got rid of the chorus? Like the chorus is such a contrasting section. It makes the other 2 sections really stand out. Now think of getting rid of any of these other 2 sections too. Like get rid of the right. If you got rid of that cool 5/4 section, the song would be so much worse, right? It's like such a cool introduction to the piece, and it's so like bombastic right out off the bat. It would ruin the piece if you got rid of it. And same with that descending triad section adds so much like terror to the piece. It's creepy. It's wonderful. So I don't think you could get rid of any section, any piece of this piece, and like it would improve it. You wouldn't improve the piece by getting rid of anything. So I think the piece would be more shallow if you got rid of an element. But I also feel like if you added one thing to this piece, it would feel like too much. Just feel like too many ideas, right? Maybe take one of these ideas and use it in a different way or something like that. That would be okay. But to introduce another thing, I mean, you just don't have the time to in like a Touhou battle theme. Even an extra stage boss theme, which is like one of the longest tracks in the game. I don't think you have enough time to introduce a fourth element, and I also don't think it's a good idea either. And Zune usually doesn't. He barely ever in an extra stage theme adds a fourth element to his compositions. There's almost always three. It's just too much, you know? So the three is kind of like just the right number of elements. And I don't think any song exemplifies that more than You and Owen. You and Owen Was Heard just has a particular ability to grab the listener because it has all these really interesting things going on in it, and it switches between them pretty smoothly and does a relatively good job with modal contrast, and just the elements are so wonderful by themselves. Putting them together, I mean, it feels like it belongs together as one package. And that's kind of what you need to strive for when you're writing music. You want to strive to put it together in a way that it feels inevitable, even though it's not predictable. It's not predictable, but it feels inevitable. Those are like the two qualities that differentiate an okay composer who has decent material, or he has terrible material, but he's good at putting things together in like very clever ways, right? What sets apart either of those composers from the great composers is that the really great ones make you say, "Oh, I wish I came up with that." You know, they make you wish that was your idea. And I think You and Owen is a perfect example of like it's such a like, why do the melodies work? You know, some of the function is sort of unconventional, and the chords are unconventional. But no one would ever say, "Oh, You and Owen doesn't work." It's illogical because it doesn't sound illogical. It sounds completely coherent. And so, music is not a hard science, and before you start applying rules, use your ears and try to figure out, does this work? You know, that's something that Zune's very good at. No matter what he writes, it all sort of works, right? Nothing feels like terrible or not thought out, right? So consider that in your own pieces. And, you know, your pieces are not done when they're done, you know? When you're playing with material, it's a playground, you know? It's only done when the bell rings, essentially. So take your time with it when you write music. This is a lesson for people who want to write Touhou music, and it's a lesson for people who want to write music in general. I think, ironically, anime girl shooter beat, you know, shoot 'em up game shmup is the best way to learn a lot of these principles, because the music has to be so concise. It has to be, you know, it has to show what it's trying to say in a very small amount of time. You know, that's why a lot of times if you're trying to learn music, the best way to learn it is from French classical music, because so much of it is so short and so ingenious that it's like it's a playground for those composers to come up with really, really cool things and do them in a super focused manner. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you so much for watching the video. I know this was a long one because it's You and Owen. It's a big deal. It's a big deal piece of music. Thank you, Seahawk0027 and your YouTube channel, because the gameplay from this video came from that video. I tried beating Remelia, or what is it? I tried beating Flandre Scarlet, but I didn't get very far. I've actually once CC'd Touhou 6, ironically, but I cannot beat Flandre Scarlet. I hear that, like, from people who play Touhou, that she is one of the harder extra stage bosses. And also, you don't have a hitbox marker. There is a mod for it. Maybe I should just add it and I'll play it more, but I'm just not good enough. I'm just not good enough. I know it's all positioning. I've played shmups before, but for this video, I didn't want to have to grind for 200 hours. So thank you, Seahawk. Your video is very useful. And that's it for now. See you in 2 weeks about. I usually try to get it out in 10 days, but sometimes there's delays, like with the last video. The Two Distant Friends video apparently did pretty good. I was like, no one even knows this music. Why would anyone care about this? But people watched it. So thank you. And I think you'll be excited for the next piece, because we're going to be talking about a very different topic. We're going to be talking about predominant dominant chains again and stuff like that. Those are my one of my favorite things to talk about. So we'll get to that next time. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Please donate to my Ko-Fi, because it tells me that there are people who care about this sort of theory enough for me to keep making these videos forever. Otherwise, I will stop making them. So please donate so that I can keep doing this, so that I can prove both to myself and other people that this is a worthwhile thing to do, that you actually want. It can be as small of a donation as you want. But thank you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Good evening.